Welcome to Inspirational Journeys, everyone. My name is Ann Harrison, and in this episode, my special guest, Marjorie Turner Hollman, is going to talk about her series of books called Easy Walks, and we're going to talk about writing and editing and all things in the writing life. So welcome to the show, Marjorie.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm really, really glad we finally got to put this together.
Yes, me too. So why don't you introduce yourself to our listeners and our viewers, the audience?
Right. Thank you. I'm Marjorie Turner Hollman, and I am an author. I help people write their own stories, and I also am an editor. So I help people get their stories written in the way they best want to. 30 years ago, I found myself transformed from being a healthy single mom with 2 kids into a mom who could not walk across the room because of brain surgery that saved my life but left my right side paralyzed. It's been a journey since then, recovering quite a bit of my walking ability, but when I'm out on trails, I use hiking poles. And of course, there's other health issues that go along with brain surgery and the results. So those are all things I'm still learning how to live with a changed life, as many of us are, not just me. And that's the impetus for many of my books that I've written.
Oh, okay. So what inspired you to be a writer?
Well, actually, what inspired me to be a writer was that I found myself, instead of being able to clean houses, which paid a lot of my bills, and be a professional storyteller, which was really becoming an important part of my business, when I could no longer walk or work, I was left with, well, what can I do? And I was able to write. Thankfully, my mind is very clear. I did not lose my voice. And I had always avoided writing like the plague. I had no confidence in writing, and basically being put in a corner with feeling like I had nothing else left. I started writing just little stories about my kids and our neighbors, and ponderings of what it was like to live with a changed life. So that began a journey that I never dreamed of, I never expected nor planned for, or was really looking for. But there I was. Writing was something I could do when all else was taken away from me, it felt like.
Wow, that's amazing. Yes, the writing can be very therapeutic, and it can also help you express yourself in ways that you may not, just as a speaker. So what how do you help authors write their stories?
Okay. Part of my writing development was I spoke with our local newspaper editor, and she mentored me in writing articles for the newspaper. And we quickly found that I had a real strength in writing profiles of people's stories. Why were they doing the specific thing that they were doing? I really enjoyed that work, but I was looking for being able to write more. And I encountered the world of personal history, which is working with people who want to record their family stories, or a topical autobiography, as it were. And I, because of my newspaper work, I knew how to interview people. And so with this community of personal historians, I learned the other tools of recording a person's conversation and then transcribing and transforming those conversations into written narrative, readable written narrative that I helped people turn into self-published books. So I learned all of those tools that you need to be able to write your own books, publish your own books. And so that's what got me into drawing people's stories out of them and helping them put that into readable narrative. A lot of people can tell wonderful stories, but translating that into written word, I I equate it to being a magician. You take something that's three-dimensional, our voice, and flatten it into 2 dimensions on a page. And there's a disconnect, and a lot of people really struggle with that, putting the life into their written words.
Wow. The three-dimensional voice versus two-dimensional writing on the page. I love that analysis because, I never even thought about that, never even heard that before. So tell me why don't you tell me the story behind the inspiration behind the Easy Walks
Oh, thank you for
series?
asking. It's really, that's been a whole journey in itself. Because I had a website for helping people with writing, I also had written this newspaper series of getting outdoors and where could you find local places to walk. Because in that series, I went out and walked these places myself. I realized that there were places that were easy for me and places that were a lot harder. My husband and I get outside a lot, and he taught me to use my hiking poles to help with balance when I'm not on a paved surface. So I had written this series of outdoor places, put them on my website, and after a while, I realized, looking at the figures for who comes to your website, that this one particular article, 500 people had come to it, and
Wow.
they kept asking, "Where's Joe's Rock? How do you get there?" And I said, I don't think people locally even know where these places are. Maybe there's enough for me to write a book. And so I started just kind of in a circle around in the town I lived and the other towns very adjoining. I just started researching, and I found enough to put a book together, looked at other trail guides, kind of used them as a structure. And because I knew self-publishing, put that together. Once I got that, you have to start marketing your own book. And somebody said, get a Facebook page. So I did. And what do you do in Facebook? You put pictures up, and where were more pictures, I started going to yet more places. And before I knew it, I had almost a second book. I didn't even realize it at first. I was just marketing. And so that was the second book, and it has just kept building. So kind of took on a life of its own. People, I say it's sort of an obsession, and friends of mine will say, it's not sort of, Marjorie. It's an obsession. Just take it. It's an obsession. So a
Wow.
real passion.
Because I was wondering, one of the things that I learned at the conference, the Kingdom Writers Conference, Courageous Writers Edition last week, and yes, well, last week as we're recording this, but when you're hearing us, it'll be back in September. But one thing I learned is the number one way to market your books is through email list. Have you thought about doing an email list?
I have an email list. Yep,
Oh,
I
okay.
do. It's not super effective. The more powerful, at least for me, yes, I do have an email list on MailChimp, and I haven't been real good about doing that. What I have is a Facebook group, because I had a page for my book in Facebook that wasn't getting a lot of traction, but I created a group because that seems to work better with Facebook's algorithms.
Hmm.
And at this point, there's nearly 13,000 people that have
Wow.
come to, I know.
But
And a lot of that's because of the pandemic. People were desperate to get outside because it was the only safe place to be.
right. And I was thinking, if you have authors that you could collaborate with them and do newsletter swaps and things like that. That's one of the things I learned. Just a
Sure.
just a
Yeah,
side tip there. So tell me a little. Let's shift to the new book. What was the
sure.
inspiration behind this, My Liturgy of Easy Walks? I know you talk about having brain surgery and learning how to walk again. And I love some of the essays about walking, and now I'm on the healing section.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, all right. I couldn't remember if I'd sent you a book, so
You
thank you
did.
for taking the time to read it.
I'm still working my way through it, but
It's they're only 1 or 2 page little meditations.
yeah.
When part of my helping to publicize the book, I reached out to places like where I went to college, and I attended Gordon College for 2 years. It's on the North Shore, north of Boston, and it is a Christian college. I specifically went to a Christian college from high school. I wanted some more exposure to mature Christian thought in an academic setting. And so when I was looking to market my book, I reached out to the alumni magazine at Gordon and asked if they were interested in interviewing me about my writing. They welcomed that, did a wonderful, wonderful interview. And when they published it, I was shocked to see the headline of this profile. The writer who did it headlined it, "A Liturgy of Easy Walks." And I never would have thought of that, but I just said, I think that's the title of my next book. And then I had to figure out, what was it? From there, I recognized I had this massive series of essays that I had written over the years, specifically focused on the experience of living with a changed life. So it meant going through all of this back catalog of essays, figuring out how to put them topically, because this book ultimately is a topical memoir. There's only 2 kinds of memoirs. One is what called chronological, meaning I was born, I did this, I did that, and now I'm where I am. The other is a topical memoir, and it can be any sort of topics, a specific trip you took, a specific experience, a specific passion. So those are really the only 2 memoirs, and mine is a topical memoir focusing on faith, healing, a family, the connections of family, and walking, because that's been a real tool for me in healing.
And when I read the walking, and the healing ones were good because I could picture the dances, but when the Marjorie dances, I love that.
Thank you.
But when I read the different essays about walking, I could picture you walking along. I was like, it was like I was walking with you beside the lake, or
Mhm.
taking that walk with you and your visually impaired friends. That was really, I could picture us walking together. It's like I was walking with you as I'm
Thank
reading
you.
this, and it's awesome. So, and I'm praying that God will lead me in the right direction with this conversation. I want to turn to your editing. What inspired you to start editing?
Oh, let's see. A lot of that was just the struggle to write myself, and the skills that are hard-won skills. Let's see. When you're writing, I was not a grammar person. I was not a skilled writer. And so I had to work really hard to gain this. A lot of times when any kind of skill comes easily to a person, they're not real good at teaching it because they don't understand the hard work that comes of it. They don't know how to communicate to somebody else who's struggling, how to do that. I've struggled myself. I know how hard it is. So I don't just expect people to be good writers. I think it's part of my wanting to give back and encourage other people in their writing. I have a local writers group that my neighbor who's an author and I both started at our local library. And we come and just read together whatever anybody is writing. Between 6 people and 14 people, it varies, but we've been doing that for 5 years. And we invite people not to do editing in that group. We're just giving people a platform to share. But we invite people to share the written manuscripts after. And I started just doing some feedback for them on those those different pieces that they were writing, I found I really enjoyed it. And so from there, I developed more skill. I learned track changes in Word, how to communicate to people, both comments and specific grammatical things that I had learned. And I found I really enjoyed it. So I guess that's how I've learned. It's been not osmosis, but a process of recognizing that I had a skill that was hard earned.
You and I had that in common, because I felt like the Lord was leading me to edit, because I can spot a grammatical error, and I can spot where somebody's telling me what's going on instead of showing me.
Yeah.
My developmental editing skills, I can do some of that, but my line editing is my thing.
Yeah.
And I can do some developmental with like world building and that kind of thing with fiction. I'm not a good nonfiction editor.
Okay.
But I actually looked at a lady I met at conference. I actually looked at one of her devotional type stories, and I could see that she needed a lot of show versus tell and some world building and stuff. And I told her to find a nonfiction developmental editor first.
Well, that's what I do.
Oh, you do the nonfictional, you do the developmental editor?
I've done memoir I've been doing memoir for 10 years. So yes, I do a little bit of fiction, but my strength is nonfiction developmental editing.
Okay. I'm going to connect you with Patty. I'm going to connect you. I'm going to introduce you to Patty, because I think she needs your expertise. And then if you want to send her back to me for the line edits, I can, I think we can, this is how we can collaborate together.
Oh, wonderful.
The Lord is blessing us with so many different ways to connect. So
Pat, I'm going to type in my new email that I may not be able to access otherwise.
If you put it in the chat, I'll save the chat, and then
that's what I'm doing right now.
And then that way I can.
All right, I'm just making sure I did it. mtutn9@gmail. There you go.
Okay, thank you so much.
Welcome.
So did you have to do any training for that?
My training has been 20 plus years of newspaper writing.
And
storytelling. I've taught a lot of workshops on telling your story and interviewing, a lot of workshops in that direction. And before then, this is where I've tapped into my professional storytelling background, because for 14 years, I went to every storytelling conference and event that I could go to, took all the workshops, and learned a tremendous amount of story structure, and also about leading participatory workshops, that people aren't just taking in information, they're learning by doing, not just by telling, like you say.
Yeah.
So I've incorporated that into my perspective on developmental editing, because I'm looking at how are you telling the story? How are you starting it? What's in the middle? How are your transitions? What's coherent about what you're saying? And how do you wrap that up? And page turning. I mean, I'm a reader. And so I read lots of things, and I pay attention to how do you keep the story moving. So that's where I come from, is from a storyteller's perspective.
And I love to pick an editor's brain, because everybody does things differently. I am not one of these people who, and I mean, I'll call things out when I see it that need fixing. And then sometimes I'll call out the little grammar things in a comment. And then if I see it multiple times and it's just small things, instead of changing a whole sentence, if it's small things like a comma here or a passive voice there that I've already pointed out, I'll just fix it. Because I'm tired of writing the same thing in the comments 50,000 times. I just fix it. And then and it's in track changes. If they don't want to keep that suggested fix, they can delete it, or, keep it.
Exactly.
Just, because you get, but I'm one of these people, I like to champion my authors. And I work with Celebrate.
Bless you. Yeah.
Thank you. I work with Celebrate Lit Publishing and edited, I think 1 entire novel, and then 8 novella manuscripts. which
Nice.
was going into 2 different anthologies. So I've done quite a bit for them, and I'm hoping that I can work with them again, and then I've done some stuff for another friend. But I took an introduction to children's book editing course,
Mhm.
which and that's where I'm writing children's books too, and that's where I got my love for that. And I took a copy editing course, editing and proofreading with Chicago Manual of Style course. And let's just say, I found that some of the stuff with the Chicago Manual of Style was very tedious, but
Oh, yeah.
I use it because that's the industry standard. So I do,
Right.
I changed some of the, like the ellipsis is supposed to be spaced out, the periods are,
Yeah.
and stuff like that. So that's why I tell, and I'll comment, I changed it because this is the rule according to Chicago Manual of Style. I'll put that in the comments.
Right. Right.
Um,
And
but
this
anyway,
is part of why I'm not a line editor, Anne. But, and there's not as much training. A lot of the editors, there's Facebook groups for editors. I'm not sure if you've come across them. Some very editors, let's see, Editors Association of Earth is a Facebook group for editors, and they've got people around the world, and they talk a lot about exactly what you're saying, the Chicago Manual of Style. It's a place where they can ask questions and people weigh in. So
I need to
it's
check that
really,
out then.
yeah, Editors Association of Earth.
Okay.
And they've got related pages. Once you get into that, you have to ask to get in, and you just basically have to say what you do for editing.
Okay.
But they talk a lot about Chicago Manual of Style and other stuff. Mostly I hear very few people really love to do developmental editing. They see it much more time consuming. You have to read through the whole thing instead of just looking for details. But I'm not a detail person. I don't love details. I like big picture. And so,
Developmental editing, if I look at a fiction manuscript,
mhm,
I can write the critique letter, and I can do those. I can do those. It'll take me 2 days to do a developmental edit, where it takes me 2 weeks to do a line edit.
huh,
Yeah,
well,
because I'm more meticulous with the line edits than I am I'm
yes,
reading for big picture stuff and developmental, but then with line edits, I'm more meticulous with
yeah,
the grammar, the show versus tell,
sure,
and now with Celebrate Lit, I was doing a little bit of both.
yep, yep.
Because they wanted it back within 2 weeks, and I didn't have the 2 days to do developmental, and then the extra 2 weeks to do line edit. So I had to kind of put both of them in comments and stuff.
Sure.
But I don't normally do that unless, depending on the
Mhm.
deadline. But I can do both. But
Yep.
I'd rather stick to one and then the other if I'm working with a.
And I do the same. I work with other editors that I refer people to.
Mm-hmm.
And I always say I'm not the nitpicky, down to the last detail. I'm not a proofreader. You need to get somebody else who
Yeah,
does
I'm not a
that.
copy editor.
Yeah, and so, those are all different skills that I make
Mm-hmm.
no claim to. I like the big picture. I'll fix some things when I see them, but I am not the person to do those real detailed editing. So I
Oh,
work with other editors as well. I have
oh,
trusted editors that I use. Glad to
okay.
know that you do that too.
Yep. So, do you have any tips and advice that you want to leave with the audience?
Hmm. Gosh, what I love to tell people when they say, "Oh, I'm not a writer," and I encourage them that writing is a skill. It's not a gift. And if you say, "I'm not a writer," to me that says you haven't practiced enough. And yes, there is a difference of being able to put life into your writing, but it truly is a skill. It's not somebody that's either just born as a writer or they're not. It is something that you can improve no matter where you start with practice.
It's funny you should mention that because I talked to another lady who's gonna be her episode airs later on next month, or I think it's in either. No, I think it's in November that it airs. But anyway, she said she's not a writer, but yet she's written 2 books, and she does a blog. It's funny because she has this book called Soul Selfie, and then where she writes blogs about her battle with leukemia, her leukemia experiences and
Mhm.
the people she knows about addiction and other things that she writes about. She has 120 blogs in each one of her books, and then she has Heather Carter is her name, and then she has her blog, and I think she's going to put together another one. But I
Mhm.
read that, and I'm like, and she says she's not a writer. I mean, it could have used just a little tiny bit of tweaking to make the
Yeah,
edits
but
work.
that's editing.
Yeah,
That's editing.
but she, and the only thing
Yeah.
she does is edit for she gets an editor to do grammar and spelling, but she doesn't change her blog post because it's what God gave her. But I'm
Oh.
thinking, don't tell me you're not a writer. See, that's what I'm saying. That's the funny, and I'm giving Heather
Yeah.
a shout out because God, of course, and that was with me with poetry. I can't, but God can, and that's
Yeah.
what we
The
really.
other thing I encourage people to, yes, write blog posts, think about them in a book. That's it. That is what I did for my Liturgy of Easy Walks. But you also, blog posts don't always translate directly into a book. There, you need some transitions. You need to make sure that you have a consistent voice. And so to just drop blog posts into a book, I would encourage a person to revisit them and try to make it so that there are transitions, there are topics. It's what I tried to do with my own, and I actually got help with that too, because I was too close to see
Right.
where the themes, and I think you are already seeing that there are themes in those, but that was not easy to figure out for me. I needed outside help.
Right, and she said she got an editor not only to help her with grammar and spelling, but to help her put it together in categories.
Yes.
Like her leukemia ones were together,
Yeah.
and then she had some other things that were together, and it was by day and by category. It wasn't dated, but it was
Mhm. Yeah,
different
and
categories.
that's exactly what I'm talking about is,
Hmm.
so she did get help, and most writing is editing,
Yeah,
and you have to learn how to edit yourself. But
right,
then there's a time when you say, I need some outside eyes.
right, write, revise, edit, and repeat.
Oh, yes, repeat and repeat. People
Oh
ask me
yeah,
sometimes, how many times do you rewrite? And I say, I don't know, 25, 30, 40 times. And, that's maybe working and tweaking things, but you just, it's not a good thing to say, I've written it and it's done. Because
mm-mm.
walking away and just giving it some time and then revisiting it, you see things that need changing. It just
Right,
helps to give a little time between them.
right. So if people want to connect with you, where can they find you online?
Online, it's www.marjorieturner.com, Marjorie. So marjorieturner.com. Thank you for asking.
Okay. So if you wanted to give the listeners a call to action, it could be a challenge or a resource. What would your call to action be for today?
Oh boy. I would encourage everyone, first off, to recognize that everyone has something to give. Everyone has something to give. Um, Figure out what that is, ask people what that is, explore. It's an inner kind of journey that we all can go through if we're willing, and then figure out what it is, how you can give that, even if it's just being a listener, which is a very valuable gift, or doing a podcast, or becoming a writer, or telling stories, or helping someone who needs a hand. We all have gifts.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to ask you a couple questions here at the end, and I like to do this with my Christian authors, Christian guests.
Mhm.
Do you have a
Sure.
Bible verse you'd like to share?
Oh gosh.
Yeah, I don't mean to put you on the spot.
I would say what immediately comes to mind is Psalm 1, that, and I can't quote it specifically, but it's talking about walking, walking, sitting, walking, stopping, and sitting, and that there's challenges there. I'd have to look it up, but it's a precious memory from probably youth group when I was in high school, of the transition that psalm brings to whether you're walking or standing or sitting, and to be aware of where you choose to do that walking, standing, or sitting.
I love that. So now, would you like to close us out in prayer?
Sure. And my most favorite prayer is, Lord, keep us thankful for what we have, for what you've given, and keep us mindful of all the blessings that we have. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. So we challenge you today to go out there and read to get inspired, write something inspiring, and share your creation with the world. For when you've touched one life, you've touched thousands. Thanks for joining us on Inspirational Journeys. And remember, your story matters. Have a blessed day, everyone.